All right, guys, happy Friday if that's when you're watching this. So, we're going to dive into this really quick. I told you I want to keep everything, notes plus the work I give you, to hopefully half an hour or less. I'm really hoping for less. Just want to point one thing out very quickly. Since I posted these notes originally, I've made a couple tweaks to what I'm covering today. Um, and if you copied them, especially the copy with the blanks, uh, you won't see a couple of the things we're going to talk about. So you may want to write them out, or they're in the complete version. I just want to point out there are some discrepancies. You can find them in, like, the current version that's in Google Docs is in sync with this, but I just want to point it out because some of you might be like, what the heck is that? Okay, we're going to dive in. I don't want to waste your time. I know you got a lot to do today. So we're talking about still the road to revolution. How did we get from we're all one big happy family of England to, well, maybe actually we're not? And last time we talked about all these kind of governmental philosophical ideas that drove us to believe what our governments ought to be like. Representative governments, the rule of law, no taxation without representation. Well, you guys know where this is going. None of what we're talking about today is brand new and surprising, so let's just dive in and see. Um, we talked about how the legislatures and the royal governors that were there often disagreed, but the governors don't really have a whole lot of power because the colonists controlled the taxes, right? The colonists were the ones who voted for those representatives, and they would tax themselves. We call that power the power of the purse. That's what that picture's doing over there. Something you'll learn about me is that the pictures I put up there, I put there not because they fit with history, but because I think it'll help you remember stuff. Sometimes it's history because I don't, I mean, what am I going to do for Montesquieu, right? He's just a weird looking dude with a funny nose. So I put him in there. But Power of the Purse, I needed something. So I told my wife, I said, honey, I can't find a picture. Tell you what, give me a purse and I'll just take a picture. But, so that's okay. Maybe not. Anyway, so, um, so because the governor doesn't have this power that the colonists had, he usually loses. So he's usually this weak guy, and it doesn't amount to much. Okay. You remember though, the colonists are loyal to the crown. They still consider themselves British. They just want their assemblies to have the power to tax, and if they're going to get taxed by the king, they want a say in it. That's all they want. So Parliament basically says, you know what, this royal governor that we have in some of these colonies isn't doing much. So why don't we start a policy of salutary neglect? Now, let me talk about these pictures because you're probably wondering what in the world this could have to do with salutary neglect. Well, the picture on the left, you've got a military figure who's saluting the flag, or maybe he's facing this way and he's saluting us. I don't know. But if you look at the word salutary, the word salute is built right into it. And who or what do you salute? Well, you salute people that you respect. So when you see salutary, you probably don't know what that means because it's not a word we use, but respect is the idea I want you to walk away with. So respectful neglect. What's neglect? Well, usually it's a bad thing, right? If I just leave my kids at home and my wife and I go on vacation to the Bahamas, that's neglecting them. That's bad. We shouldn't do that. I'm leaving them alone. But the picture of the guy in the car with his driver's license, some of your parents maybe are like, you know what? You're older now. You can go off and do your own thing. We're not going to keep your parents probably keep close tabs on you, but you're going to have a little bit more freedom and autonomy than you used to have. So this guy here in the car probably doesn't feel neglected. He probably feels like he's being given some space. He can drive where he wants to go, and maybe he's got to check in, tell his parents where he's going, but overall they're just like, yeah, do your thing. It's going to be good. We trust you. That's what Parliament is doing to the colonies. They say, we respect you because you're doing a great job. You're making us rich. Remember, that's the whole point of the system they're using, the mercantile system. As long as you're doing that, we're not going to complain. So just kind of rule yourselves. And the colonists are like, that goes along with everything we believe. Assemblies are important. We don't get taxed by people who have nothing to do with us. We represent ourselves. It's perfect. Okay. And then this thing comes called the French and Indian War. Now, this is a really complicated war. It's actually a spillover of something happening in Europe between France and England called the 7 Years' War, where they're just kind of fighting all across the continent. And it's going to spill over into North America. Now, The reason it spills over into North America is that the French and the British have signed a treaty. The colonists, the American colonists, will not go west of like the Appalachian Mountains. That would be French territory. The French are hunting and trapping, and they're allied with the Indians over there, the Native Americans, we would call them today. Um, and everybody's like, that's fine. We're never going to need to go that far. But as the colonies grow, the colonists start spreading out. And wouldn't you know it, they spread west of the Appalachian Mountains. Well, the French don't like that. Neither do the Native Americans. And so they start attacking the colonists. Now, it's at this point that Ben Franklin, yep, that Ben Franklin, you've heard of this guy, he makes a proposal. He calls this the Albany Plan of Union. So Albany's in New York. He issues this there. And basically what he says is the colonists ought to work together. We want to unite so that we can fight against our common enemy, the French. And if we don't, we're going to die. So you see this, his famous cartoon that Ben Franklin drew. He calls it Join or Die. And they send this proposal off to England thinking that England's going to be like, yeah, you should all work together. That would be great. And England is like, heck no. In fact, the people they send it to don't even bring it to the king. The king doesn't even reject it. They're just like, no, we want you separate. We don't want you together because that could be a problem for us down the road. So just don't do that. But then the Parliament makes a huge error, I would say. See, they feel like we need to pay for the war. And whose fault is it that the French and Indian War happens at all? Well, the colonists are the ones who went west of the Appalachian Mountains. And the British had to send boats and troops with guns and uniforms and food and all that stuff to defend the colonists, which they end up doing. So the question is, who should pay for the defense of the colonies that happened because the colonies broke a treaty that the French and the British had? Well, the British are like, obviously, it should be the colonists who pay for that. And so Parliament says we're going to tax the colonies. And we have these smugglers who are, coming in and out and they've been trying to subvert the mercantile system. They're trying to trade with other countries. We're going to crack down on that. We don't like that. They're not going to ask for the colonies' input on any of this. They're just going to roll in and tell them what to do. So imagine that your parents were like, yeah, you can go anywhere you want, anytime you want. You don't have to tell us where you are. Just, bring your cell phone. We'll get a hold of you. And all of a sudden, one day they bust into your room and they're like, I think you're up to something. You need to tell me exactly where you are. Every 15 minutes, text me and let me know what's up. Tell me who you're with. Your curfew is 10 o'clock at night, all this stuff. So there's no more salutary neglect. There's no more we respect you, so we're going to leave you alone. And this is the beginning of taxation without representation. Specifically, Parliament passes an act called the Navigation Acts, which is just going to tax a number of goods that come into the colonies. This is a direct tax. Now, very, 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 very quickly, a direct tax is a tax that says we're going to charge you directly on top of what you've bought. So if you go to Walmart and you buy a mug, I got my nice flash mug right here. Let's say it costs $10. Okay. Well, Walmart says, all right, $10 plus 6% tax. You're going to pay us $10.60. And I'm like, okay, that 60 cents is a direct tax. Indirect tax is another option. Okay, an indirect tax. Let's say I've got my I have a root beer. I don't just sit here and drink stuff all day, I promise. But I have a root beer here. Let's say that this root beer actually should only cost like 75 cents, but it's taxed 25% to the store. The store has to pay a 25-cent tax. So the store could say, well, we're just going to charge you $1 for that root beer. So the tax is actually built into the price. That's the way gas works. When you go to the gas pump and you buy, $20 worth of gas, you're paying taxes on that. It's just built into the price. Okay. So this is a big deal because the colonists feel the Navigation Acts. They're like, you got to pay this thing. They don't like it. They also have to pay now this thing called the Stamp Act in order to get official documents notarized. Like if I write my will out and I go to a lawyer and I say, I want you to stamp this thing and say that it's an official document. Well, now that's going to be a tax that I got to pay to the government. And so all these opponents around the colonies show up. They don't like it, okay? Because this is not what we've done. We don't believe in taxation without representation. And so they boycott these things. They say, if you're gonna sell mugs and you're gonna tax them on top of the mug, we're not gonna do that anymore. Okay, we're not gonna buy mugs. I don't know if the girls also girl cotted. I'm not sure. Um, that's a joke. Okay. The Sons of Liberty, an organization is thrown together that basically says anybody who's going to try to collect these taxes, we're going to make their life miserable. You may have seen pictures of tarring and feathering. In fact, I've got a picture in the front of my classroom of a guy who's uh, getting tarred and feathered. That looks like funny, but actually the tar that they will dump over these guys is really hot and can jack up your skin. And then they throw all these chicken feathers on them. So the Sons of Liberty are like an annoyance at best and low-level terrorists at worst. And they're patriots, okay? But if we had people doing that to us today, we wouldn't be big fans. There's a Stamp Act Congress. Basically, the different colonies are going to get together. Aha, that's important. And they're going to start talking about, hey, what are we going to do to fight this Stamp Act? Remember, the British don't want the colonies working together, and now they are. Well, the British realize they goofed, so they repeal the Stamp Act. But then they make an error that I think is maybe even more egregious, and that is that they send troops to the colonies to restore order. Go calm those people down. This is where you get the Boston Massacre here over on the right. You get 5 colonists who are going to be shot one night. They're dock workers who are out of work because the British have shown up and they've shut down the docks. And so they're kind of rowdy. They're probably drunk, and one of them throws something at the British. Well, the British have guns. And so somebody, even though they have orders not to fire, somebody does. And when one person with a gun fires, everybody thinks there's a threat, and so they all fire into the crowd. And by the time the smoke clears, 5 colonists are killed by the British soldiers. Well, the response to this is that the British are like, let's pass more taxes. And so they do. They pass the Townshend Act, which brings about more boycotts. They tax tea. It's actually a little more technical than that, but we'll go with this for our purposes. This is where you get the Boston Tea Party, right? The British drink tea all the time, just like I'm always drinking coffee. The British are like tea. And so this is when you get a bunch of Americans dressed up as Native Americans who go on a British boat and dump it into the harbor. And in today's value of cash, that would be like more than $1 million worth of tea that gets dumped into the harbor. And so England responds to that with these things called the Intolerable Acts. The colonists call them intolerable because the British say, until you pay for all that tea, we're going to lock down your port. We're going to have troops that are there in Boston. They're going to be staying in your home. And nobody's coming in or out of the Boston port. And this is a huge issue because now they're interfering with trade even further. And now we have a Continental Congress. The entire continent, okay, all the colonies get together and they're like, we've got to respond to the British, okay? Again, Albany Plan of Union was rejected because the British didn't want them all together, and now they're all together. Huge ideas. All the colonists want at this point is not independence. What they want is the rights of Englishmen. They want to be treated with the same respect that they had before. All those governmental ideas we talked about, they're like, where are those? You're ignoring those things, okay? They want them back. They want to go back to no taxation without representation. This is finally going to build to a head when the British realize that the colonists are starting to stockpile guns, and they say, we've got to take their guns away. And so the British march on 2 towns, Lexington and Concord. These are in New Hampshire. And they march there. Now, it's a long march. It's many miles. They leave early in the morning. The colonists know that they're going to come, in part because Paul Revere, who you know, and William Dawes, who you probably don't know, hop on horseback, and they basically say, the British are coming, you better hide your guns. And so they have enough time to hide the guns, and when the British show up at the villages of Lexington and Concord, the townspeople are there to meet them with a few guns. The rest of them have all been taken off. And there's a tense standoff, and somebody, we actually don't know if it was the colonists or the British, somebody fires a shot. And just like before with the Boston Massacre, boom, shots are fired on both sides, and the war is on. Once you started shooting and killing each other, you can't really take that back. This is a very interesting battle because by the time they realize there are no guns, they're like, well, I guess we're going to march all the way back to, I think it's Boston, they're quartered in. And they've got to march, it's like 15 miles by foot after they've been shot at all day and they've been walking all day. And the colonists basically shoot at them the entire way back. And so the British are like, we're going to have to do something. And now they're going to send even more troops over to try to calm it down. Spoiler alert, that backfires. Now, I'm going to show you very, very quickly what your homework is. Okay, this is not going to take you long. The question I have for you is this. Was there any other way that this could have gone? Was there any way that this entire war that's going to come about after the events of Lexington and Concord, is there any other way this could have been averted or avoided? But here's what I want you to do. And there is an assignment that you'll see that's dropped in Classroom. I think it's pretty easy. It should be marked out. I haven't made it when I'm recording this, but I don't think it's going to be hard for you. What I want you to do is to try to think of a way that the colonies and England could have both gotten what they wanted. So what would you suggest? Okay, so let's say you're a negotiator who's called into a room with these two sides. What do you propose to try to avoid a war? Secondly, I want you to decide at what point is it too late? When is there a point of no return? Okay, is it Lexington and Concord? Is it when the Albany Plan of Union is rejected? And, is it something in between? Is the French and Indian War? Is it the taxation? Is it, as soon as the colonists step foot, it's inevitable that they're going to clash with the British as soon as they step foot in the, American soil. So I just want to know what you think that point of no return is. And then finally, what impact would that have had on history if that had happened? Here it says list at least 3 things. I may change that. It might only be 2. Do whatever you see on the slide. But that's it. Okay. This is not super hard. I hope to show some of these to you in class when I see you again. Maybe have you decide what you like the best. I'll try to strip names away, so don't worry about that. Probably anyway. So let's see what we can do. Okay. Guys, that is it. If you got this far, thank you. Good deal. Email me if you have any questions, as always. And I hope you have a great weekend. Bye.